Oh, the mic light is on. The camera light is on. Hey guys, let us know in chat if you can hear us.
Or see us. We might be invisible.
Yeah, or see us. Or both, or neither. All of the above.
Looks like raise your hand if you're not here. If you can't see us.
Yes, can hear you. Sound is good. Loud and clear.
Groovy. All right, everybody. Welcome to City State Entertainment's Top 10-ish for this week. Our update on Camelot Unchained. I'm Tim Mills, software engineer, and Ben is our designer.
Yeah, sometimes.
I don't know everybody's specific titles. Our titles are a little fluid sometimes. So we're going to be talking about our top 10. Tyler is hammering away at some production schedule planning stuff this week, and Mark's also super busy. So me and Ben will be your hosts this evening. When we hit Q&A, if you've got engineering or design questions, let us know. So let's just jump on this. Per all the Tyler not being here because of lots of scheduling and planning stuff, number one is scheduling and planning. This week, production has been busy planning our sprints leading into Beta 1 and planning out each step and delivering CU. Our next sprint focuses on alpha delivery of the Scenario 2 map and mechanics, and it should be a lot of fun to test. Just occurred to me that normally one of us takes engineering and one of us takes art, and Ben is not really either, so you just want to alternate on these?
I can explain art.
You want to do the art ones?
Sure.
Okay.
That will be fun.
Perfect.
Number two is testing. Every day this week we've had play tests with our alpha and IT backers to challenge our scenario systems, our proxy servers, and our UI. Once this build is a bit more stable, we will push it to the Beta 1 testers. So I know some of you Beta 1 guys got in there with our break the build test, trying to find and discover bugs, crashes, anything that's broken. We continue to iterate on that so that we can get it to a state that we can say, now we guys want you to actually come in and play the game as opposed to just finding stuff that's broken. So we've really been hammering on that. I want to give a shout out to Brian because normally this would take up an enormous amount of my time, and he has been a champion with running these tests and triaging them and helping us process all the data and all the reports and all that comes out of that. So big
Brian.
Thanks to him, and you guys, if you see him in game, give him a thanks for me, please. Number three, scenarios. Caleb's been working on stabilizing our scenarios and adding UI for players. This allows us to help manage these from the back end. Oh, there's stuff happening over there. So there's lots and lots of stuff that goes on in the scenarios, and we're sort of always iterating on the front and the back end and everything in between. Caleb's been helping me a lot today with some issues we've been having on the scenarios, and he and I haven't gotten to work together on a lot of stuff in a while, and so it's always great working with Caleb. He's really on top of all this stuff. So just in general, we're working on hardening scenarios and finding all the little bugs that sort of fall out of the edges, and so we made a lot of progress on that this week. The item script support is number 4. Christina has completed our first pass of our item script support. This will first be used in some of our upcoming scenarios. You heard us talk about Scenario 2 for the scheduling and planning, but we'll also give the game support for focus items and having items affect your characters in cool new ways. So there's just lots of, like, right now, items, and Ben can speak to this a little bit if he wants, items largely just contribute stats to the skills that you're doing. And we're working on making it so that items actually do things when you pick them up, put them down, equip them, interact with the environment. And so the goal is just to give items things more similar to abilities so that they can do stuff above and beyond just being a bag of stats.
Yeah, well, they do things passively too. So they have like resists, right? Resists aren't like an active thing that you do. They're just a stat on your character. Right. So they have either stats that are just passive or stats that are actively used, like damage on your sword doesn't do anything until you use an ability. But what we're actually adding is scripts so that you can define a behavior to have happen instead of just a number, because before we were just doing numbers where a number meant a certain thing. Now we're doing, basically what you would have in an ability skill node to say any number of things can happen based on whatever we set up in an item. So when you pick up and equip an item, basically anything that a skill can do could happen to you, so that items can have a lot more interesting functionality.
Right. And sort of the way this discussion evolved was I heard bits and pieces of it was some of the gameplay facets of Scenario 2, we had a couple different ways of accomplishing them, and this item scripting thing also just sort of incidentally got us foci.
Yeah, because a focus item is basically a scripted item that adds extra skill components to your spell. So there was no way to do that by just adding stats to items.
Right.
Because
so, like,
you had to say, like, oh, this does extra, area of effect.
Exactly. Like right now you could have, like, a sword in your hand, and if you stab somebody with your sword, it's just like, hey, this does 12 damage, you do 12 damage. Whereas you could have, like, a focus that anytime you cast a heal spell, it catches Rob on fire, for instance, right? And so we sort of got a 2-for-1 out of this, and that's why we ended up deciding to focus on this particular solution for the thing we wanted out of Scenario 2s, but we get focuses out of it, which is pretty badass. Building mode and general input. So we had an input refactor from George just a little while back. We needed to update building mode. Any of you guys that do building stuff on Hatchery's version of Cube, you've been working on Fledgling's version of Cube for a while now, while we get this hammered out, so it's getting closer and closer. We may have even done a test today. Brian, if he's in chat, can say whether that happened or not. I'm not sure if it did. But if not, we'll be doing one soon-ish to try and find the remaining outliers there. So this week, Matt has re-enabled building mode to allow the placing of blocks as well as iterating on bug fixes. Additionally, he's hit several other input bugs with camera movement near plots and chat window clicking and stuff like that. So lots of cool stuff coming in related to building mode and cube and UI interaction and camera movement and all that jazz. Both fallout from our input refactor and just some low-level bugs that have been hanging around for a while. There's an art one. Go in.
Yay. So 6 is art characters 2.0. This characters 2.0 thing is really just making the UV maps. So this is just the textures that go on the characters. It says John has finished off the 3rd Viking armor update. Not sure what that means either. John is working on
Tyler.
making new UV sheets.
Leave Tyler.
We don't know what these art things mean.
It's okay.
What's the 3rd armor update?
Yeah, what does it mean, the 3rd Viking armor update?
Help.
Okay, so the last 2 updates we did, the medium and the light armor. This is the heavy armor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I read that as we've done 3 armor updates this week.
Oh, no.
So
okay.
This is the 3rd armor update for the armor updates that we've been doing over the last few weeks. The 3rd one finished this week.
Right, and these things are totally sexy, far better.
Right, yeah, this is the stuff where we've just been putting like new skins on top of the existing armor models.
No, we've so the new armor models are completely new meshes. They're going basically. I've been putting everything under an umbrella of Character 2.0.
Okay.
This is something we had planned to do kind of during Beta 1, but as some of the engineering tasks took longer than we expected, we're kind of hitting that now. So we did a brief meeting just from a rendering perspective of how we wanted to do if the UV layout was working, how we wanted to change the tech to support different meshes and UV layouts, and then we're later going to go into, and we've kind of started on this, like, what do the animators not like about the rigs, and basically better define, like, hey, these are the problems we saw over all this process, make a big list and go through them. Part of that has been just John saying, taking the sheets, making everything look better, making better use of the UV sheets, and this also plans for character armor tinting and decaling as well, so that we're in the right place when we get to that.
So these aren't actually in the game. These are just finished.
No. So to clarify, as I've said in a past update, these are not going to go into the game right away. There's some technical dependencies that we need to basically figure out how much time we need to do to get them in, and whether we're going to do that pre-beta 1, day 1, or after the fact.
Yeah, right. Like, lots of times we determine how we're going to do the tech long before the tech actually manifests, and then the artists make art off of that design before the tech is even there to make it into the game.
Right, and so at a minimum, I wanted to get through some of this so that we could use them for the updated character renders in the character creation, and yeah, I'm totally excited to use them because they're far better. They just look way better.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Do you want me to hang out a sec?
I think I've got the rest of them. I mean, you're welcome to hang out. But
Okay, nope. Wife's calling.
Hello, wife.
All right. So number 7, one-handed spear attack. So Sandra is making a new spear animation. We kind of pulled spear out of the game for a while because it was sort of a one-off unique weapon. So there's a bunch of things that use slashing attacks. There's a bunch of things that use crushing attacks. But like spear is such a different weapon that we didn't want to spend
regardless of whether
it.
you're holding a club or an axe or a sword in your hand, you can just sort of stand there and hold 2 of them regardless of what they are. But like a spear is like a completely different thing where you sort of have to position your body differently for it. And so we sort of pulled spear out because it was sort of it didn't fit with all the generic animations that we were doing across this wide swath of weapons.
Yeah, so Sandra's still working on putting that in, so I'm not sure how much more work needs to be done there, but we're going to get spear back in the game here in the not too distant future. More art. What else do we have? Race-specific backgrounds. Yeah, so Michelle has been working on some new backgrounds. We're working on basically making the images that you see when you first create your character better, so that when we get a whole bunch of new people in the game, they're going to have a good experience of like, what is this character that I'm picking? Oh, I think this one's cooler than that one because of the at least part of which is due to the art that they'll be able to see as they're making their characters. And she's also going to start working on some VFX concepting. So we already have a bunch of visual effects that are made, but most of that is just placeholder until we could get further along in our systems and stuff. So as she does a concept pass, then we'll get a more clear idea of what each class and each type of ability should really look like. So that'll help improve the overall look of the particles in the game.
Well, and also in the past we've talked about it's sort of the same thing with the spear, is we sort of do this generic pass on everything where like you've just got like a generic I'm swinging a weapon animation, and then we work on like I'm swinging a sword versus I'm swinging an axe versus and so part of this is moving towards the realm distinct visuals so that eventually swinging an axe looks differently depending on whether you're a Viking or a Tuatha or an Arthurian.
Yeah, we sort of start off with a bunch of placeholder stuff just to make sure something is happening, and then as we get everything just working in the first place, we go back and replace it with things that are actually meant to look good. Let's see, we got more art in here. 9 UI UX. James finished off. So James Koo finished off a couple of items this week, including 27 new status effect icons, which is good. And the countdown to beta timer, which is on the website if you've seen this.
Did it actually go live?
It is. It's on the website. I don't know. Can you show that, Max?
I can link to the website.
Okay, you can link to the website.
Yeah.
Quickly.
Go on there, check it out.
Before it was live.
Yeah,
fantastic.
It's fantastic. And currently he is fixing the new race backgrounds, which are the thing we just talked about that Michelle was making. So yeah, that's new stuff for the character creation and new stuff for the website and new status effect icons. So you'll see as you get buffs and debuffs on your character, there's going to be some new icons that go along with those. There's a lot of art in this update.
There is. That's what I said. So Tyler managed to duck out of the art-heavy update.
I'm in production.
That's impressive.
Are there any other questions?
No, we're good.
Okay.
I guess we're okay. 10 is work in progress art, place of power / scenario 2. Dion finished improvement pass on several of the assets, including materials and geometry for the main rock walls, general rubble, spikes, pit. Like, there's just all kinds of stuff going on in there.
Have we talked about at all what Scenario 2 is with backers? Do you know?
No, we haven't.
Okay.
We're doing a
Because there was
cool
that
new thing.
fantastic conversation that happened last week about, like, a thing that could be a model, but it could also be a game design. And I was going to talk about that, but since you guys don't know what Scenario 2 is, I don't want spoilers yet. No
Yeah.
spoilers. So, yeah, she's just been working on a lot of stuff for Scenario 2, both tarting up the place of power and some of the art that we need for the new gameplay mechanics that are in Scenario 2.
Yep. 11 VFX SFX for the new status effects. So we just said we were getting new icons for the new status effects. They're not really new effects per se, because like you could set somebody on fire before, right? It's just that now we're going and making a more robust system for displaying that. So you'll see words pop up on your character that says like slowed or whatever. You'll see an icon pop up next to your unit frame where your health bar is. that will show you that there's an effect on your character. And we're also going through and making new sound effects and visual effects. So the fire effect when your character catches on fire will actually look better as well. So we're going through all of these effects so that basically every time you get a buff or a debuff on your character, there's a lot more information that's going in so you can tell what's happening and so that it actually looks good. Number 12, art, casting animation support for melee weapons. I'm not really sure what's going on here either, but it says previously casting animations would remove your weapons during cast, which is true. Sky's wrapping up an improvement by adding the generic cast animations into weapon animations so characters will set their weapons to the side then cast. I think what that means is that they're putting their weapons away, that they're going back into their unreadied state to cast, so like you'll sheath your sword and then cast a spell and then get it back out. I think that's just the animation for that. There's supposed to be a later set of tasks which will allow you to actually switch between weapons by changing stances, and that will involve the animation for putting your weapons away and getting different weapons out. But that's a little bit further down the line. But at any rate, that's just some general improvements to the animations that are going along with casting.
Yeah. So this week we've had lots of tasking and planning for this upcoming sprint. Also revising our process and continuing to sort of improve our process now that we're full bore towards beta 1. I mean, not that we weren't before, but we've got a date and we can set targets and plan stuff more appropriately based on that. We've been doing lots of testing this week that we talked about, and the art team's doing a lot of work getting ready for scenario 2. So we just go into Q&A.
Yeah. We're going to open it up to some questions. And then at the end we have some gifts to open and some gifts to show off and a letter to read from Klansverker. So we'll get to that at the end. All right. Give us your questions. We're going to direct design questions toward Ben and tech questions towards Tim.
So what you guys haven't seen is like behind the camera. Normally, like, this is the first time I've been in front of the camera since Max has had his whole like desk set up over here. Normally it's just like behind the camera there was like a box with a laptop on it. And so we finally got Max like a setup so he's not like sitting on the ground the whole time.
Which means that Max went in the back room and set it up himself.
But now I feel like I'm like being interviewed.
Feels more official.
Right, yeah. Need to like ready up my CV so that I can go on stream.
Right. Well, we're going to put you through it now. Wow, and the first question is an art question. This is perfect.
Okay.
The first question is an art question. So, Odelvik says, Hamblepants asks, in some of the images/streams, the weapon textures look high-res, while the armor textures look low to medium resolution, even with textures turned to maximum in the settings. Will there be higher res textures for armor usable in-game higher than what's there now?
So I can talk about that a little bit. We definitely downsample the textures on your armor right now, just for memory reasons, and there's some tuning we can and will do there. And I believe we've got a doc or a Google Sheet somewhere with like some of the build bars you can set up. But there is a way right now that you can turn up the resolution on your character armor textures. We just haven't because I believe turning them up runs into problems with like thousands of people on screen.
I don't think you can even do that in the settings, can you?
No, it has to be like a build bar when you start the client. Yeah. Like you got to do the whole alt-click thing, and there's like a character texture atlas size, and it defaults right now to I want to say 1024.
Yeah, it's down-res to 1024.
Yeah, but it goes up to like 4096, I think.
I'm not sure if it actually does. I thought it was like
it might be, but you can at least get twice the resolution, if not 4 times the resolution, or it might be 4 to 8 because it might be on the side. I don't remember. Anyways. There's lots more resolution there on the textures. We're down-resing them right now to save some memory. So there is plans both to expose some of those settings so that people with bigger video cards can crank them up for both memory reasons and performance reasons. So right now we've just gone with a conservative lower setting.
The other part of that is the art we were looking at earlier where we said characters 2.0. we're actually looking at changing the way our UV layouts are structured in order to further optimize the pixel density across the entire character. So when you say like your armor looks low res, your UV isn't exactly like one-to-one as far as the pixel density across your entire character, because some parts of the character's UV sheet are larger than others relative to the size on their body. So like your head, for example, your helmet has a higher resolution basically than your torso does right now.
Also because it's closer to the camera, right?
I'm not sure that even matters, but in the
But
UV
I mean, we're
sheet,
talking about like how many pixels it takes up on screen is sort of what you care about, right?
yeah, that's true. But what I'm really talking about is like just the amount of pixels on the UV sheet
Right.
versus the size that it relatively is on your
Right.
screen, one body part to another. This closest to your camera perspective is like kind of negligible compared to. It's a much bigger
Right.
difference as far as like the actual.
So, like,
Character
for those of you
sizes.
that don't know, like, a UV sheet is basically like if you take your entire body and sort of unwrap it into, like, one flat piece of skin, there's a texture that's like, here's where you put the torso, and here's where you put the head, and here's where you put the arms. And if we wanted to, we could use, 80% of that for, like, your nose. And there would just be, like, so much detail on your nose, and then, like, 4 pixels for all of the rest of your body. And so what we're doing now is sort of retuning that so that we get the resolution on the parts of your body that we care most about.
Yeah, so even if we don't change the overall size of that texture, redistributing some of that will hopefully show some higher detail and using the same size of a texture. And then also we'll use bigger textures as we get into
Right.
further optimization and add that to the settings instead of making it just a build var.
I can add more info.
All of that being said, engineer, designer...
Yeah, we don't know what we're talking about.
No,
Tyler,
no, you guys got it right. You guys got it right.
Oh, I know I got it right.
The interesting thing is part of the tech thing that I mentioned earlier is that previously we had gone to an atlas kind of within an atlas being...
Don't you have production stuff to do?
I do. We have...
Stay on track.
So, if you assume that we take all the textures, right, and we stick them in an atlas of basically we've allocated all this memory, we've said here's where all the textures live, and we no longer have to keep calling them every single time. What we had done with the characters was we kind of had made our own atlas of parts of those characters, and then another atlas and another one. One of the things we've talked about is freeing up art a little bit for all the kind of tertiary elements. So let's say I make a shoulder piece that has big, giant horns. Not that we're doing that, it's just a very great example for MMOs.
Confirmed by Tyler, giant shoulders.
In the original atlas, we've only laid out, say this much space in that atlas for your right and left pauldron. They're actually 2 different blocks. If we were to make something that's extra big, the way we would do things differently would allow us just to kind of make an atlas soup where we didn't have to have the characters, all the art in predefined little sets. We could actually kind of just drop them off and basically put the characters together in a different way. The other cool thing that we talked about doing was adding tags to certain materials so that we could get better alpha on stuff. Alpha is the transparency that you see between, can see through and can't see through. Right now, for performance reasons, we do a black and white alpha. So we actually do like a little crosshatch pattern. What we've talked about is being able to tag certain small pieces as basically a grayscale value alpha. So for things like hair, beards, eyebrows, chainmail, feathers, fur, things like that, we'll then have the option to actually say make your pauldron that has fur on it, but we'll take a little fur card and we'll just kind of throw him out into Atlas Soup, and he will get a different render pass so that he has a really nice clean alpha. So there's a lot of things that we've just come up with that are really cool that'll make the characters look better.
Also, you were talking a little bit about how weapons and armor seem to have a different resolution. Like, there's different texture sizes between your weapons. I don't know what those texture sizes are.
Okay.
But, like, all of your armor, every piece of armor ends up getting stuffed onto the same texture for your character. And then, like, the weapon is its own thing.
Right. So, weapons actually, right now, we actually are crunching down the texture sizes of the characters just for performance testing and stuff, just more stuff that we're working on. The weapons don't get that, so sometimes you may look at it and your weapon looks like it's a higher fidelity, and that's because it is. Weapons actually get the same treatment where we're saying, like, you can later put together a handle, pommel. No, what's this?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you call this
Crossguard?
thing? Cross. I know
You
cross.
can have a grip, you can have a
Grip.
pommel, you can have a
Pommel,
crossguard,
that's
you
what
can
I'm
have a
doing.
blade.
Pommel. handle, crossguard, blade. So you can put all these pieces together.
So my
and all,
axe can have a crossguard?
No, your axe
no.
doesn't.
Basically, what we're saying is like, if we made a bunch of different pieces for like different axe heads, crafters could put together a bunch of different axe heads, a bunch of different handles, a bunch of different pommels, and then they could actually kind of think about those. What are those little toy things where you switch the head and the body and the legs on a character?
I was thinking about putting crossguards on everything.
It basically be the same
my
idea. And we do a little atlas, so this space is for the blade, this place is for the handle, the pommel, and the idea is like if you look at any of the concepts over the last year of all the weapons, you'll see that they're all done as kind of like individual pieces that can be swapped in and out. But we have to build that system.
So anyways, right now, player armor is being down-resed, and the weapons are not, because they have smaller textures.
Alright, DVD TRBX, Builders Brigade questions should be directed at Mark when he comes on stream next. I don't understand this question, but maybe Ben does. Sacrix asks, can you give us an overview of defensive playstyle of how passive and active it will be, taking into account melee versus ranged arrows and melee versus melee?
That might take a while, but as like a brief
I'll go get you
summary
a
of
beer.
that, you can have a certain degree of passive defense just by what you have equipped on your character. So having heavier armor, focusing more on resists as opposed to mobility, will give your character a lot more survivability from things just throwing damage at you.
Is deflect considered a passive defense for the most part?
It is, because you aren't actually doing anything to deflect. It's just something that occurs on a timer. And then on top of that are like all of your active abilities. So anything that increases your self health, increases your resists, makes you immune to certain types of damage. There will be a certain number of skills for each class that have some kind of defensive capability. Obviously, some classes like heavy fighters are going to have more of those than other classes like mages. So it's a matter of what you wear and equip to your character, and then also a matter of like what your skills are and what skills you decide to build and use and progress towards in terms of progression.
Right, because like the Fianna's got like a modifier that gives them like a little regen when they use an attack, right?
Yeah, so some of their attacks actually give them like self-regeneration.
So
there's going to be
you could
more
opt
to
for
him.
like 10% extra damage or like 5% regen over whatever.
Yeah.
Adric Cortesia asks, for Ben, what are your tasks until Beta 1?
All of them.
Yeah, I don't think we have a task list of everything until Beta 1 all laid out. We sort of break things down into like high-level epics where it's like, well, we know the big deliverables that we have to make, and then as we do each sprint, we break that down into very fine-grained tasks of like, hey, make these abilities have these properties, or hey, finish this scenario map with these props, or whatever it is. So we don't exactly like lay out everything in exact detail all the way to beta, but I have a task list that's like just for this next 3 weeks basically that has like all the details in it. Some of the things that I'm doing, like I was just saying, like working on the scenario map, we're going to have a new scenario to play that has some new gameplay to it that we're in the middle of working on, as far as like Tim was saying with having items do new and exciting things where you can pick stuff up and drop it off to earn points in a scenario, and as far as having just a new map that's using some of our new props. So you've seen maybe in previous art updates like the Place of Power that we had been working on, so that's going to be on the new map. We're going to be doing just getting a new zone all put together, so there's going to be some new environment pieces and some other stuff that goes into that. So that's a lot of what I'm doing. I'm also going through and hooking up all those status effects so that you can get descriptions of what all your buffs and debuffs are. And all those new VFX and everything also has to be hooked up in the ability system as well. And then I'm going to be potentially working on adding some new skills. So right now we've, for our testing at least, turned off skill building and just given you the ability to use all the starting skills that your class has. So we're going to go through and make sure all of those at least have proper visual effects and sound effects and animations playing the way they're supposed to. I think they all do have visual effects playing because there's hookups in the skill system for those, but some of them aren't playing the right ones. So we just need to go through and audit all of those. So that's like, 14 abilities times 9 classes. We have to go through each one and make sure they're all playing all of their parts correctly. And then we can get into some more playtesting and maybe do some balancing on some of the classes, make sure everybody's doing good amounts of damage, has good amounts of healing, and work towards having some actual fun playtests, as we were saying, as opposed to just run around, make sure nothing breaks, and make sure the server doesn't crash.
Lodeween asks, how will putting weapons away to cast a spell compare to the time penalty of changing armor?
Can you say that again?
How will putting weapons away to cast a spell compare to the time penalty of changing armor?
Oh, okay. So you're talking about the update that we were just reading. That's just in terms of the preparation time of the spell. It doesn't really affect anything. That's just
mostly cosmetic.
Yeah, it's just a cosmetic thing, so that like if you're going to like throw a magic projectile, right? If you already have a sword in your hand, it's weird. So we're just like hiding the sword and then throwing it and then getting the sword back. So it's just part of that animation. It's not really, it doesn't really do anything. So it doesn't add any extra.
So like
time.
the way like our weapons work and most animation systems in games is like you have bones and your guy has a bone in his hand, and we basically like snap your sword in there kind of like a Lego, and it's just attached to your hand regardless of what your dude's fingers are doing. It just faces whichever way your hand is facing. And so like if your dude's over here like casting a spell, there's swords cutting your arms off and your face off and stuff while you're holding that sword. So initially we just made that sword disappear. You made your fireball, you hucked your fireball, and then your sword came back in. Now instead of just making it disappear, like we're doing like a quick like put away and then a fireball. But one of the things we've talked about before is our gameplay drives our animations, not the other way around. So if our ability says, in some games it's like, it says this is a 3-second animation and your ability is going to take 3 seconds regardless of anything else that's going on. Our system says this ability with all of your modifiers takes, 2.5 seconds, and if your animation is a 2-second long animation, we'll make it play for an extra half second, or if it's a 3-second animation, we'll scale it down to 2.5 seconds. And so the animations are always just cosmetic. They're visual representations of what's going on with the ability. And so that put the sword away part doesn't mean that we make the ability take longer. It means that we have to sort of adjust the animation so that it's got a put away part and then an execute part that all fits within whatever the actual ability you have crafted tells it to run at.
Carlitos,
But, hold on.
Go ahead.
Do you want to talk about armor changing at all? Gear changing?
Well, so the other part of that question was about like changing weapons, right? So like
Time penalty of changing armor.
Oh, changing armor? So changing armor is sort of an unrelated question. So changing armor is going to be going into your inventory, taking off some things and putting on some things if you happen to be carrying extra things, which are going to possibly go over your weight limit and contribute to encumbrance and slow your whole character down. So like we don't really want people to be like, I'm in the middle of a fight, I'm taking a lot of damage, let me switch to my complete heavy armor set so that I take less damage right now while I'm fighting people. So armor is going to be relatively costly to have a lot of extra in your inventory as far as its weight goes. We're potentially going to have some timing for actually swapping items onto your equipment as opposed to your inventory. So when you put on something or take something off, there's going to be a delay there intentionally to make it so that there's not a lot of quick swapping of things while you're in the middle of fighting people. And that doesn't apply to weapons in quite the same way, because we do want you to be able to swap weapons while you're fighting. So if you're, example, an archer and somebody runs up to you and starts trying to melee you, you can actually put away your bow and get out your sword really quick. But the way that happens is that you will have multiple points for equipping swords and bows and weapons on your character, and by switching what stance you have active, you can just switch which weapons you're using. So you can swap weapons while you're fighting, but not so much swapping armor.
And that's sort of, so it's the difference between like anybody who played Dark Age, right? Like you could just change your armor and weapons around basically instantly in the middle of a fight. What we've designed, what Ben and Mark have designed, is a system where you can fairly quickly swap between a half dozen or so weapons. Your gear's pretty much locked in place unless you like your dude actually wants to like fiddle around with like removing armor and putting it in his backpack, and so there is there are mechanics which allow you to fairly quickly but not instantly swap weapons. Like, you got to change between stances, and so your dude's gonna like real quick like put away a sword and pull out another one, or do something like that. Whereas like if you're taking your armor off, it's what, to the tune of seconds.
Yeah, so it's gonna take long enough that you're not gonna want to necessarily do that while people are fighting you.
Yeah.
Carlitos Way Elite asks, how far along do you expect to see the 9 classes mechanically for Beta 1?
Right now our mechanics are actually fairly simple, I would say, because there's a lot of things that we would like to be able to do that the system still needs additional time worked on. But we're right now mostly focused on still getting features implemented for like raw functionality. Like, for example, Rob, who's been doing a lot of ability system programming, is currently working on some stuff for getting animations to be hooked up right and being able to scale the number of animations that we have associated with classes, and working on getting the effects to play, so making sure that like when arrows hit people we can play visual effects, which we currently can't do right now. So there's a number of things where we still need basic functionality hooked up, so there's not a lot of super complicated things that we can really do. Now, of the things that we have, between having different armor sets, having basic capabilities of assigning stats to weapons, giving you different abilities for each class, so they're not shared, they're all more or less unique, except for the base fundamental utility things like sprint everybody gets. There's going to be a good amount of stuff in there. It's just not going to be very complicated, so you won't have skills that do a huge amount of conditional logic and a lot of combinational potential and building up and expending resources and things. You're going to have basic weapon attacks that cost stamina and inflict damage, apply some status effects like we were saying, like bleeds and slows and stuff like that. It's all kind of the fundamental things that you will see in the early part of the game. So when you start off the game, a lot of the mechanics are going to be fairly simple for your class, so you can kind of get a good feel for it and get a good basis for what it's doing. And as you progress and unlock new things, you'll continue to advance in your complexity, as well as to some extent the power of your character, although not very much because it's mostly horizontal. You'll gain some power as you level yourself up, not exactly gaining levels, but gaining ranks in your skill mastery. But the complexity will also increase. So the complexity when you start the game will be relatively low. That's sort of the level that we'll be at as we sort of start off our beta phase, where we have only so many skills per class. The skills aren't very complex as far as their mechanics, but it'll grow from there.
Iron Nightingale asks about night capping. Will player forts and castles be siegeable at all hours, or will there be some way to limit vulnerability?
We definitely don't want you to show up in the morning only to discover that everything you did for the last 6 months has been wiped out because it was destroyed while you weren't online. We've discussed a number of ways to approach that. We haven't really announced exactly what that mechanic is going to be. That mechanic is not going to be present in the early stages of beta testing. So that's a solution that we will be looking into more and discussing later on in the development when we get more into the long-term persistent open world testing phase.
Yeah, and part of that is, right, like, we want for you to build a guild city or a castle for your realm. We want that to be an investment, both in time, in terms of like the time that the players put into it, the resources the players put into it, so that once it's done, there's this sense of accomplishment, this sense of realm pride that brings people together to want to work together and support each other. And we don't want that to just be trivially destroyed because you went to sleep and somebody in another time zone or somebody, with more free time than you or whatever has the ability to play when you're asleep. Though we also don't want to prevent those people from playing when is convenient for them to play. So there's a bunch to balance here. What we do understand, we've played a lot of these games, is that, your guild going to bed, having a really cool keep that you've worked hard on, that you've spent days, weeks, months on, and waking up and seeing it in shambles is hugely demoralizing. It's really, really painful. We get that. We do. And we have a bunch of plans, a bunch of systems in place that we want to test and play out and bounce off you guys and iterate against to find the right mix.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of considerations for that, which is why it's not like a single solution. It's not like, yes, you will be able to lock your keep for 8 hours a day, and the other hours it's vulnerable. It's not that simple. There's going to be a sort of a multi-layered approach to exactly how we solve that problem, but it is definitely a concern, like how long it takes to build stuff, how much resources it's going to take to actually construct a castle, how long sieges last if you don't want to fight, player versus door for like 8 hours. Like, we don't want those battles to be long, but we also don't want people to be able to destroy your whole castle while you're asleep. So how do you balance that out? Like, it's going to be a fairly complicated system. So
and another layer of that, right, is what does the repair after damage has been done? What does repairing
like
look
how much
like?
did it cost to build it? How much
up
did it
the
cost to
pieces?
repair it?
Yeah. So again, there is a layered process here of even if you're present for your keep siege, like losing that is still like a huge blow. And so how do we make you want to defend these, make you want to go out and destroy theirs? How do we make both steps of that fun? And how do we empower people to pick up the pieces and continue defending the realm and all of that? There's a bunch of loops and cycles that are all sort of layered on top of each other.
Hey folks, I just want to let you know that they're enjoying this very much. You guys have a great dynamic. Also, there's a lot of questions and limited amount of time, so I'm going to limit the numbers of questions from the same person.
So if Max doesn't ask your question, it's because it's not a good question.
Yeah. No.
Max just hates you.
Sacrix asks,
that's two questions from Sacrix.
Yeah. How integral do you think the depths will be to the game over the overworld building and crafting before going there, Ben?
I think it will be very integral to the game. So the way we've sort of talked about the tiers of resources has been, there's the basic resources that you get like on your starting island. There are normal resources that you get out in the world, like kind of on a common basis. There are like rare resources that you get either like around places of power or that spawn like very, very rarely and you have to really search for to find. And then there's the resources that come out of the depths. And so going into the depths and getting the rarest resources that you can find and getting control of the depths, maintaining defense of it when other realms invade and things like that is going to be pretty important, I think. And it really depends on how far we can go with it, how much randomization there's going to be to what degree that really gets emphasized. But assuming we can do a really good job with building out that space and having there be a lot of fun encounters to go through, I think that placing a high emphasis on it won't really be that big of a deal as far as like taking away from the open world, because there's going to be a lot of the time when you can't even go there, and being able to go there is going to be kind of a special thing that you really want to do whenever you can. And assuming that that's fun, I don't really think that's going to be too much of a conflict of like there are people who like the depths and there are people who like the rest of the game in the way that you would get if you had like another completely optional path like raiding or scenarios or something in the open world.
But that also opens up like some other play styles too, right? Like there's going to be those guys who really like sneaking around all the nooks and crannies of the depths and harassing like the other realms or whatever. And so it's not just about like one is better than the other. It's about also exposing a bunch of different play styles. And also when we say stuff like the resources from the depths are integral, like you're going to potentially be able to make better gear from that, right? Mm-hmm. But we're not talking about like the difference between a green weapon, a blue weapon, and a purple weapon where like you're not getting orders of magnitude more power from like depths items.
Yeah, it's better items, but it's not necessarily just raw more powerful items. Like one of the main things we've talked about, for example, is just items that have higher durability. So like if you get a depths item that has really good materials, it's not necessarily doing like 2x damage of the sword that you got from making it in the open world, but it might have 2x the durability, so it lasts a lot longer, so it actually has a lot more value because you don't have to replace it as much. So
and we've talked about stuff where like crafters might be able to, and this is way out on the crafting discussion, but just we've talked about stuff where like crafters might be able to make like really powerful magical extra rare weapons periodically based on like soul infusions and some other stuff. Let's just, for the sake of the discussion, put a name on it and say like you could make Excalibur, right? So you make Excalibur and you've made it from above world assets and you've got this really baller sword that goes around and murders everybody and it's fantastic. and then a month or two later it's busted because it ran out of durability. If you make the same sword from depths materials, you might get the same stats out of it, but it lasts twice as long. And having Excalibur last twice as long doesn't make you stronger in a fight, but being able to pin on that weapon for twice as long as a player is a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
Folks, just to let you know, a bunch of questions have scrolled off, as there are many of you. And only one of me. Dreege L wants to know from Ben, but also from both of you, what are the ideas you had that couldn't be validated by engineers because of performance issues, or not codable, or not doable, or too long to build, or whatever?
I would say for me, especially as I'm an engineer, most of the ideas that won't come to fruition are not because of any technical limitation, but simply because there's not enough time for us to put everything we want into this game.
Yeah, a lot of what you don't get to put into games is simply based on scope. So if there's something really cool that you really want, if it's really important and it's really cool and it's going to make the game that much better, you can usually do it. Now, I would like to have 5,000 player battles, and you probably just technically can't do that. I would like to have like the islands moving in real time and crashing into each other and having like tectonic like events. Like, we could potentially do some of that, but it's going to take
We haven't ruled out
longer.
like real-time moving islands, mostly because we haven't delved super deep into them.
Yeah, like there's just things we haven't gotten to yet, and that's another thing. Like, we're not even in beta yet. The number of things that we are or aren't going to get into this game is still largely undetermined. So we're going to have to do some investigation into a lot of these questions to see exactly how much we can or can't get out of them.
The cool part about that, though, is once the game finally launches and we've delivered on everything, hopefully delivered on everything that we've promised, there is this huge reserve of really fucking cool ideas that we've got that we can continue to work on post-launch.
Trying to...
Like sharks with lasers.
Certainly naval combat. Yeah.
I think that's what I said.
Yeah.
Notlock asks, will there ever be a change-up of the movement system from what is previously used?
What is previously used? Like what is in the tests that we've been doing the last few days? We don't know. Okay. So movement isn't by any means finished. A lot of that is going to rely on the support classes, which aren't even in the game yet, to help you do, long-ranged roaming and stuff like that. We're working on a little bit of the mechanics behind the way that the movement abilities work. Actually going into travel and toggling in and out of that, and how sprint works and coinciding with that is a little bit clunky right now. So we're going to work on improving that somewhat. But the overall idea of it, of like your character can move around in normal speed while you're in combat. If you're going to run across the world for a really long time, you can move a bit faster. If you have support characters, well, they can boost your movement, so you want to have them in your group as one of the core utility classes of the game. That bit of it is probably not going to really change, but I'm not really sure if that was the entire context of that question.
We've as been said, in case you were unclear, we've got support classes. I think we're calling them music classes. Or speed classes.
I think it's just support.
Speed classes. Okay. I wasn't sure. But so, like, we have...
I don't want to really call them speed classes, but...
Yeah, I know. I understand, right? Because, like, everybody then, all they do is speed.
Yeah, because they can be just the one-trick, like, speed bot that you just, like, put on auto-follow and it makes you faster.
We do have a design for a class which augments at least the groups, if not the realm's speed around them, right? Mm-hmm. And that empowers your group to move at speed throughout the world. In the absence of that, because that's not one of our Beta 1 classes, we've provided everybody with travel stance. And I assume that once we have those classes, travel stance will get some revision.
It'll get some revision. It might go away entirely, but I don't really think so, because, like, we want you moving at a slow enough speed for when you're, like, actually in combat, so that we don't have to make gigantic castles because everybody runs really fast, and so the interiors would be too small if you didn't make giant buildings. Things like that. So as your character runs around fighting, you're going to move at such a speed that it would be probably not very enjoyable to go a very long distance that way. And we don't want you to, like, require a support or a speed class to go really far anytime you have to do it. So probably there will be some degree of faster than combat speed that everybody can move at. But then obviously having a support class with you will make you move faster. So that would be advantageous, but not necessary.
There's also the possibility, we've talked about just some random stuff, and if Ben wants to comment on any of them specifically, there has been discussions about either allowing us and or you guys to produce roads, which would allow you to move more quickly along those, or trails, or allow some of the scouts to provide similar buffs to either themselves or to realm mates. Also, potentially a mechanism which would allow groups that have been broken where like players have died in the group to be reunited, specifically allow those two entities to gravitate towards each other more quickly. So we're building a big world, a really, really, really big world. We want you guys to be able to move around the world at a pace that makes sense for you to find fights and to engage in combat and defend the realm and protect the realm and invade your enemies and lay waste to their villages. We want to facilitate all of that, but also give the size of the world meaning and consequence. And so, like we talked about before, there are several layers to this. Right now, we've only got 1 or 2 layers in place.
Sacrix passes along a question from Zumos. Do you think 1 melee for live launch is good enough?
Well, I wouldn't say 1 melee for live launch. I would say for beta 1.
Because we've got more than one melee for live launch, right?
Yeah, so there are certainly other classes that there are stealthers that are primarily melee. There are the shapeshifters, which are mostly melee. So there's not just 1 melee class for sure.
Some of the devout.
Yeah, the devout is they're
a little bit of a hodgepodge.
Yeah, they're kind of a hybrid character, right? So like they're going to have some like melee ranged attacks. I don't classify them as melee because they don't primarily do like melee damage types, but they have a bunch of buffs and secondary effects that they get for their melee attacks. So there's some interesting stuff there that you could do if you like the melee play style, I would say.
But I mean, even and by no means do not take this to mean that the healers are melees, but like the healers even have some like special melee abilities that are unique to them.
Oh yeah, pretty much every class in the game is going to get some melee capability. Just like most classes are going to have some degree of range capability. Now that's not to say that like your Black Knight is going to have like the best, ranged attacks, but you can still equip a bow and shoot arrows at people. So there's not like this hard limit where some classes can do entirely all the melee things but none of the ranged things, and other classes can do all of the ranged things but none of the melee things. But there are certainly advantages and disadvantages where some classes are going to be better at some things and some classes are going to be better at others.
So we've got more than 1 melee class at launch. A beta 1, we've only got the heavy fighters. Mm-hmm. And you may also find that what it is that you look for in a melee class is fully encapsulated in a non-melee class with the added benefit of healing or supporting or whatever else it is. Because melee means a lot of things to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
All right. Rahalden asks, do permanent warbands have a unique progression and or special warband skills?
They do have a unique progression. I don't know that they have like specifically active skills right now, but that's certainly something that they could have. We've talked a little bit about like old Warhammer style banners and how those work, so we'll see what they end up having. It's sort of a very new and different feature that we haven't really done a whole lot with yet, but because it's going to be something that we're going to try and look at supporting moving forward, we'll see what other features and benefits we can add to those to make them interesting.
Also, 5-minute warning, folks. 5-minute warning. Sacrix passes along a question from Necromaniac. When can we expect building and destruction in main game for scenario battles?
I don't know.
What I can say is there is work happening at present to that effect, but we don't have any specific deadlines for you guys.
Yeah, it's not going to be in the first scenario because that doesn't involve buildings or castle sieges. We sort of talked about doing that as a scenario earlier, but then we did some evaluation on where our building system is at, so it needs some more work before we're actually going to be able to do that. So maybe next scenario?
Probably not in scenario 2, at least not immediately in scenario 2.
Medex and Sacrix are asking, are you planning to have a guard ability like War and also a taunt-detaunt system and hold the line type abilities in CU? Will we see these in Beta 1?
Max be like, I'm only going to answer one of your questions. And here's Sacrix's 5.
You have a good point.
There's multiple people asking it. So what?
Yeah.
I just want you guys to know that Sacrix is asking better questions than all of you.
So let's do one question at a time. What was the first one of those?
Taunt and hold the line, like War.
Taunt,
Was that the first one? Okay.
Taunt and detaunt stuff.
Not in the same way that you see in Warhammer. So we will be having some abilities that modify damage potential and help you want to kill tanks as opposed to want to kill everybody else. But not that one specifically, because there are some hang-ups with that and some difficulties in ensuring that people understand what's going on and make sure that there's not conditions under which you're forced to do non-optimal actions in order to deal with those. So there are specific mechanical problems, I think, with doing taunt, specifically taunt and challenge, and the different ways those worked if you're talking specifically about the Warhammer abilities. But there will be other abilities that sort of perform similar functions to that have more obvious counterplay that don't suffer from those same problems, I think. What was the next part of it?
Hold the line type abilities?
Yeah, so I really like Hold the Line. The problem with Hold the Line in Warhammer, at least, was that it worked backwards. And so if you wanted to really use that ability, like the idea of it was...
Was that like the block stance? Is that what Hold the Line was?
So Hold the Line reduced... I don't remember the exact effect, but it was defensive, and it provided defense to you and everybody behind you. So the idea of it was you were supposed to like stand in front of your group and like absorb all the hits for them. What ended up happening was you stood like behind your group and then turned around backwards and then give everybody behind you a buff. So it was there were some issues with that, I think. But there will definitely be things like shouts that work that way, where it's like this gives everybody around you some defense for a while. There's like some guard type effects that will allow you to deflect and intercept attacks that are directed at nearby allies. So there will be some things that work in similar ways.
Yeah, I really, really liked guard as a PvP mechanic where like you do some damage soak for somebody else. And,
that's one of the best abilities.
Right, because that's sort of like a risk-reward thing where like you amplify the damage you take, which sort of counteracts / leans on the ability of you to be a tank and protect other folks. So that it scratches a whole bunch of different itches that like your standard tank player wants to fulfill, and does it in like a good, solid risk-reward gameplay way.
Mm-hmm. Was there any more to that, or was that it?
I'm sure we could find more out of it.
It has disappeared. Okay.
Let's move on. We got to wrap this up. Saya Ouo asks, what are your biggest inspirations out of other games, especially for the action combat part of the combat system?
What's the action part? Let's see. There are so many games. So I've been playing MMOs for a really long time. Like going
Let me
back
preface
into the
this
Evo
with
days and EverQuest days.
we play a lot of games, and I'll let Ben get on the specifics of that. Any specific game that we list here is not a game we are trying to make our game like. It's just a game that we have liked facets from. Because somebody out there, we're going to be like, hey, I kind of liked Guild Wars 2, and everybody's going to be like, oh god, that's a terrible game, they're making this game like Guild Wars 2, it's awful. Like, that's not it at all. We play lots of games, and they inform, we glean ideas from, and we try and pull the best of those into what we make.
Yeah, so because I've been through so many MMOs and so many other games that have interesting mechanics as well, I don't have a really good reference of like, this game, most of what's in this game is coming from this other game. So even Dark Age, because this is, you know, a 3-realm RVR Camelot inspired MMO, it's not even mostly coming from that game. It's coming from a whole lot of different places and trying to come up with new things based on, you know, deriving concepts from some of the previous games and some of what did and didn't work. I would say most of the things that have influenced how I go about putting this game together have come from the other games that I've worked on. So Warhammer, Star Wars: The Old Republic, and to some extent Firefall, although that was a very, very different game. So more of the RPG games that I've previously worked on have been helpful in figuring out, you know, what would really work and what feels good in these games and what hasn't worked in trying various things. So that would be my personal answer to that. Obviously, we've got a lot of people here who've got a lot of different experiences that are going to have different answers to that. But that would be what I would say, at least on a very cursory glance.
All right, you guys ready to open some presents?
Do we have to?
Tell you what,
Or you could stay
you
here
can
and
open
answer
the
30 more
present
minutes
and
of
I'll
questions.
read the letter.
Oh, okay. That's
Oh, well, here. First open this
Yeah,
one.
that's what I
The
said.
letter's
Ben-
for the other one.
Yeah, I said Ben can
Oh, okay.
open the present and
And
I'll read the letter because
unlettered-
Okay, well, I'm going to go get the scissors. Okay, so the one that Ben has is from Ludovic, and I'm going to go get the stuff that Tim's reading about.
I suspect Ben doesn't want to read letters.
yeah. That's fine.
So this one's from Ludovic.
Yes. Go ahead, Ben.
We're gonna figure this out.
Thank you, Ludovic, who has sent us so many little gifts.
Many gifts. So
We should have like an OSHA sign over our couch while we're doing these.
Is that important? Bubble wraps.
You send us bubble wrap.
Ooh.
That looks useful.
Yeah, that looks delicious.
Do you want some?
Cadbury cream eggs.
Nom 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 nom.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ludovic.
Thank you very much.
There's no
Ludovic,
note in
for-
here, but
for
thank you.
Cadbury cream eggs, a whole box of
A
them.
giant box of them.
Well,
That's like
you
my-
gotta.
That's like my favorite.
come on, you could do it. Come on.
I was just saying, that's like my favorite thing.
It's like the only thing.
Oh,
Come on.
going for the record.
Go get him.
So wait, who
could do it.
Who sent those?
That's from
Ludovic.
Ludovic.
Dude, thank you so much. My diet hates you, but those are like my favorite
He's
candy
full of shit.
ever.
He doesn't.
I do.
Ludovic says, a little something to show we're excited about Beta 1.
I see.
Yeah, these are like my favorite things ever. They're like crack. Oh, see, thank you for only giving me one.
If anybody wants to send me a present, German Kinder eggs instead of American ones.
So that you have the.
So
chicken
that you're choking over in the corner over
Yeah,
there. Oh, we lost
absolutely.
Tim last week.
That's fine. That's how I want to die.
Yeah, like, thank you so much.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, John's already torn into one.
Okay, and so we've got this other one from Klansverker. Yes?
Yes. This is from Arobi and Midnight and
And I am allowed to read all the names on here on stream and all that jazz. I mean, I think you've already
I think
mentioned
it's-
all the names that are on
yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
All right, just
If it's
making
just
sure.
screen names.
Sometimes we're sensitive about this stuff.
I think we're good.
Okay, so first of all, there's a really cool Klansverker stamp there at the top. Dear Town State Leisure, formerly known as City State Entertainment, we want to thank you all once again for all of your hard work that you continue to do day in and day out. We know that all of your efforts will pay off, and we're cheering you on. Just keep coding, just keep coding, just keep coding. A royal blue tang, probably. It has been a month since our last delivery of goodies, so we figured it was time to restock. We hope you had a fantastic Valentine's Day, and that all love going around, we want you to know that Klansverker loves you all. With the beta date announced, we know the next 3 months will be a whirlwind of excitement for the CU community. We appreciate the marvelous game that will come from all of this. Hype, 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 hype. P.S. We hope you enjoy the sweets and hope that you don't dislike us too much for continuously ruining your New Year's resolutions. P.P.S. We also mailed an assortment of candies to Seattle. They should receive them sometime next week. Hugs and kisses, Arobi, Midnight, and the rest of Klansverker.
Aww.
And it looks like We've
Oh,
already
wow.
plundered some of these. We have Gertrude Hawk chocolates, chocolate coconut delights, and cookies and cream, and sea salt caramels, and there's a whole bunch more in here, you guys. This
Wow.
is really awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Yay! And Matt at the Seattle office wants to know, when is the candy getting here? I think it's on the way.
Well, if you diet now, you can burn off all those calories and then have room when the candy gets there.
All right. Shall we say?
Yeah. So
farewell?
thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. Keep an eye out for our update going out later this evening, and we will see you later. Bye-bye.